Good afternoon, Riverland. Suddenly it is March, and you've caught me again listening to some of my favorite kind of music to listen to: medieval music, music from the medieval period, polyphony, polyphonic chant, and I, anyway, I just think it's the most relaxing, contemplative music to listen to, and it's great schoolwork music too. Gosh, I got a little hailstorm of things to wonder about with you. And we're going to start out in a different way today than yesterday, and I'll explain that in a minute. I put an Austin boy, Charlie Parr, before my students yesterday, and I'll talk about that. May as well talk about that today. And then we're going to have a different kind of way to get going, and then abruptly, I will be putting Charlie Parr before you with our second video of the week. So we're going to start out with a poem, and I've got three things that I want to tell you today about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I have three things that I want to tell you about William Merwin. Got a little bit of a metaphor to put before you that I haven't quite figured out how we're going to make happen down in southern Minnesota for my beloved captive charges that are taking this class asynchronously online. But we'll figure it out, I think. And then I want to end today with an invitation to you. But first, let's start with why in the world I was putting Charlie Parr before my students. Charlie Parr is one of the great musicians ever to come out of Minnesota. Talk a little bit more about him on for the second vid. But the truth of it is, I want to have my college this fall. I want to kick it off. I want to kick off the whole school year, if possible, if before life can return, and I'm not sure it's going to, by having Charlie come down from Duluth and play a great big free concert for the Brainerd Lakes region on the campus of Central Lakes College. Maybe I'll try to get him to Riverland too. If Kelly McCauley's got any money down there. And I want to have a cookout, and I want to have games, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, my Verse Like Water series is devoted entirely to poetry. And it is, except when I want to have the heart of a lyric poet on display, as I sometimes observe in folk singers and great musicians. I'll tell you the quick story I told my students yesterday up in Brainerd, Pequot, wherever they live, wherever they're zooming in from. It's about 4 or 5 years ago that I had the first ever Wandering Troubadour concert at my college. That's what I called it, the Verse Like Water Wandering Troubadour concert. And I brought up three friends, former students of mine, current friends, three genius guitar players. And in addition to having a concert, and I had a concert for everybody, but I freaked out my administration up there because I wanted to have a giant concert only for kindergarten students. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because my dear friend Paul Sprang that year, about 5 years ago, had the #1 selling children's album on Amazon, and it was all based on great American literature because his parents were both literature professors, and it's just he's an important guy to me. Well, the reason why administration freaked, they're like, "What are you doing? What if we lose a kid?" And I had already called and invited all the public schools in Brainerd, Baxter area. Bring your kindergartens to me on a silver platter. And we had to have this big meeting, and security came in, and in the end I had to tamp it all down and dial it back and call back the principals and tell them that brakes were being applied on my grandiosity. And in the end we just had this, I was allowed to invite a few daycares only. And we had these impossibly cute children. I think every single law enforcement student at Central Lakes, big program up there for us, they were all there in uniform. And the kids were all roped off with yellow tape. It looked like a crime scene. And yet Lakeland Public Television up there found a way to cover that event. And it was still super cute. Here today, because of something that happened to me, because of an email that I was sent by Naomi Ringhand, one of the greatest students I've ever had in my life. Sometimes students become your friends, and she wrote me, we corresponded a little bit last night, and she asked me if I knew Phil Levine. And I'm like, heck yeah, I know Phil Levine. I wanted to host him, but he got sick. And I wrote her back and told her that. So let's get started here today. 5 minutes in, with a Philip Levine poem that would be, I think, more perfect for an April day, but this feels like an April day. It's approaching 50 here, high 40s. Everything's melting all of a sudden, and we've gone from terrible cold to a spring day. And this poem is about, among other things, spring.
Monsieur Degas teaches art and science at Durfee Intermediate School, Detroit, 1942. He made a line on the blackboard. One bold stroke from right to left, diagonally downward, and stood back to ask, looking as always at no one in particular, "What have I done?" From the back of the room, Freddie shouted, "You've broken a piece of chalk." Monsieur Degas did not smile. "What have I done?" he repeated. The most intellectual students looked down to study their desks, except for Gertrude Bimler, who raised her hand before she spoke. "Monsieur Degas, you have created the hypotenuse of an isosceles triangle." Degas mused. Everyone knew that Gertrude could not be incorrect. "It is possible," Louis Warshawski added precisely, "that you have begun to represent the roof of a barn." I remember that it was exactly 20 minutes past 11, and I thought at worst this would go on another 40 minutes. It was early April. The snow had all but melted on the playgrounds. The elms and maples bordering the cracked walk shivered in the new winds. And I believed that before I knew it, I'd be swaggering to the candy store for a Milky Way. Monsieur Degas pursed his lips, and the room stilled until the long hand of the clock moved to 21, as though in complicity with Gertrude, who added confidently, "You've begun to separate the dark from the dark." I looked back for help, but now the trees bucked and quaked, and I knew this could go on forever.
So the thing you can do in a classroom with this, and here's an example of something you can't do on Zoom. I've been pranking students with that poem for years, and the way to do it is I walk up to my blackboard. It's just a beautiful blackboard, biggest one at the college. And kind of my dedicated classroom, and I grab a piece of chalk and I draw that diagonal line without any comment whatsoever. I draw the line and then I turn and go, "What have I done? What have I done?" And students are blinking and they're like, "What's happening? What is going on?" And I'll get a couple, 3 answers, and when the weirdness hits its cool little crescendo, well, I just pick up that little prism of a book and start reading that poem. And then they get it figured out. A couple other, one small thing, nuts and bolts stuff, business stuff. I've been spinning a lot of emails last night and mainly today because one of my students is suffering a little bit, and I don't want you to suffer in the same way that she is. And I'm going to say her name on the internet, Chloe Hansen, who's taken 3 classes from me. Her feelings hurt a little bit because she's near graduation, near the AA degree, and she's found out that she didn't hit one of the goal areas in Min State. And it was one of my favorite people at Central Lakes College that dropped that ball a little bit in terms of academic advising. People make mistakes. My life I'm a walking mistake. I just make errors constantly, and that's how you learn. Why am I even telling you this? Just, you guys watch it. Whether you're a PSEO student, a regular college student, going for a degree, going for a certificate, be vigilant about making sure that you're getting all the credits in all the goal areas that you want. Don't, yes, rely on academic advising down there, and the help that you're getting. But know that you're a little bit responsible for it too. She's going to be okay. We're going to somehow, my department is going to find a way to sneak a 3-credit class to her in the next 8 weeks. So we're going to take a 16-week class. My beloved colleague Leanne is going to smush together her environmental lit class into an 8-week class period. She's one of the finest teachers at our college, and the student's going to be fine. But it's kind of frustrating when you get near graduation and you're near. And she's going to a North Central college, North Central University, I believe, in the cities. So she's going to get a 4-year degree anyway. But this is a goal-driven woman, and she wants that. Please don't let that happen to you. Just a few things about Gawain, and it's kind of hard for us to talk about it. My classes only meet one more time in Brainerd tomorrow. We have Friday off. It's an administrative day. And so tomorrow I'm hoping that my honors lit class can talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. They got 3 more chapters to go. Hoping my intro to the humanities class wants to talk about Beowulf. And I'm hoping that my 9 o'clock and my 11 o'clock Comp 2s are up to stand shoulder to shoulder with me and try to make some sense of Sir Gawain in The Green Knight. And to repeat, there's 3 things I want you to know about, looking around for something that I need. 3 things that I want you to know about Gawain, and 3 things that I'd like you to know about William Merwin, our translator. The backdrop for Gawain is a cultural phenomena called courtly love. And I know you've heard about it. I mean, look, I love this story so much. I've been reading it by the fire by my stove going, how can my students not be loving this? Because I think it's really beautiful and I think it's a great story. And, but it's knights, shining armor, right? Damsels in distress. We've got stuff going on. And I just love, there's a breadth of lines there where like the entire Middle Ages comes after Gawain in like 70 lines, including panting ogres that have come out of caves and cliffs. And he's got to fight them all off and keep going. Courtly love was a phenomena that swept Europe in the second millennium, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. And it was in every single country: Germany, Spain, France, Italy, all the way up to the Netherlands, I think, and certainly in Central Europe, Germanic countries as well. And they just took it a little bit far. And the deal was this: if you were a lord or a knight in the medieval period, it was actually okay for you to pick out another woman to be in love with other than your wife or your main girlfriend, right? Your betrothed. And the idea was you would have this object of your affection, of your adoration, and you would love her, man. And but there were rules. You couldn't talk to her, let alone touch her. You were to keep her at a distance. You were to keep her at a distance, and you were to sort of fan the flames of your passion. We talked about this a little bit with Comp 1 in the fall when we were talking about Jay Gatsby, because that's kind of a courtly love situation, at least when he's waiting outside of Daisy's window. And it gets really bound up with weirdness in the Catholic Church, including the adoration of the Blessed Mother Mary's. And I know this because I have hundreds and hundreds of Marian antiphons. We were just listening to someone when this class started. And it makes me a little uneasy to talk about it. And if you're into this, that's great. But I am made uneasy, a little nervous by the social sciences. I don't put a lot of stock in them. And I'm talking sociology, psychology, and anthropology. Those subjects are in trouble for one thing. People are not taking those courses like they used to. And I'm not going to go into it, but once in a while, I will tap into a psychologist and read a book or two. And years ago, I read a book about courtly love by a guy named Robert E. Johnson, I believe. It was called We. And it was an examination. It was like a historical examination of courtly love, and at the same time, an analysis of a medieval story that I'll spare you called Tristan and Isolde. That is the quintessential story about courtly love, although Gawain is right in the thick of it too. Johnson argues that courtly love is still with us. And he argues further that because of the weight of the culture, history, music, art, literature, he thinks that when you fall in love at this point, we'll just keep it guy-girl, when a man falls in love at this point with a woman, What he's going to do is he's going to put her on a pedestal because of the forces of courtly love still with us. And he's going to put her on a pedestal and worship her like as a kind of idol for a while, because he's fallen in love. It's, and as Borges puts it, when you fall in love, you create a religion with a fallible God. And for a little while, she's perfect, or he's perfect if you're looking at it from the woman's point of view. Johnson points out that there's a very dangerous point in every relationship where the lovers are looking at each other going, wait a minute, you're not as perfect as I thought you were a year ago or a year and a half ago. There's a speck on your soul. I don't like the way you act in the kitchen, or I don't like the way you squeeze that toothpaste roll. I use that example a lot. And Johnson argues something really true, not bad for a psychologist. He argues that there's a point where romance has got to give way to something more lasting, more permanent. Love. The romance doesn't totally die. I can tell you that 34 years into a marriage, same woman, proud of that. But it has to kind of quiet down a little bit. And think about that while you turn the final pages of Sir Gawain, if you haven't turned them yet. I got a little B here, item number 2. You must have noticed that this book has magic in it, man. And it's fascinating to me that this poet, who's obviously a Catholic, obviously Christian, is quite comfortably mashing up magical elements right alongside it. There's a, well, I'll just put it this way. I guess I'm just talking about things that make me nervous today, and I'm getting paid to do it, so it's okay. Magic makes me nervous. I don't want to rile anybody up or hurt anybody's feelings. I didn't allow the Harry Potter series in my house when the boys are little. I didn't allow them to have skateboards either, for a very different reason. But I didn't go up that road culturally. I feel differently about magic. Why does it make me nervous? Because it's real. It's actually real, and I hope you don't mess with it. Free advice. Better stick with literature. In literature, whenever there's magic, I got to finish that thought first, though. I will be going into a Harry Potter kind of rant with my Intro to the Humanities students, because they're going to be reading my favorite play by Shakespeare, The Tempest, when we come back after spring break, which starts tomorrow for me. And there's a magician in that story, in The Tempest, Prospero, and he's got a magic book that enables him to control everyone. And he's got some pretty serious decisions to make about revenge in that story. And I won't tell you what he does. Or maybe I'll breathe the line. This rough magic I do abjure, and further than doth plummet sound, I'll drown my book. In literature, magic is usually trouble. Characters who dabble with it can really suffer. And here I'll just give you one example from the Old Testament. Saul, in the Old Testament, King Saul, even though he's forbidden magic and soothsaying, fortune-telling of any kind in his kingdom, the night before he's going to battle the Philistines, he gets nervous. And what he's forbidden for everyone else, he allows for himself. And he rides his horse out into the desert and visits this witch at a place called Endor. And he wants to sort of, channel the spirits, talk to his brother Samuel. Samuel speaks a little bit to the horrific shrieks of the witch. And Samuel's got a couple of messages. I'm grumpy, I was resting. And number 2, you're going to be destroyed tomorrow by the Philistines. And Saul cannot handle the thought of that, King Saul. So he chooses death over dishonor, and he falls on his sword. It's quite a story. And obviously, how is this story not about life? Right? Sir Gawain gets up every day to be tempted. Don't we too? Don't we also get up every morning and suffer some kind of temptation? And I don't know if you believe in virtue and vice. I do, because I'm 61, and that's just how my head is wired. And I believe in that idea that there's virtue and things that are that you can be good with, and things that are not good for you. And one of the questions I'll put before you today on this sunny March 2nd is, okay, you're a virtuous person. What good is it if it's not tested? And Gawain is most definitely tested. I want you to know three things about William Merwin, who I hosted in the year 2007. And I'm looking around for that poster and that broadside. That's okay. I may show that to you on Wednesday. When we had the feast for William Merwin, he was in no hurry to get to the poetry reading. Way back in those days, I had a young, sweet guy, Peter Murray, who's one of my gay friends. We're still friends, and he grew up in my office. And for 4 years, from grades 9 through 12, he cooked for all my poets. He was the biggest foodie I've ever seen in my life. He would come in my office and plop on the couch, and we would talk about cooking and food science. And he was just so wonderfully into it, and I love that man. And he cooked for every poet I got. His mom would drop him off, and he'd come flying into my kitchen with hundreds of dollars worth of cooking equipment, thermometers, and all this really high-tech gear. And he would make fantastic dinners for my poets. He cooked for Billy Collins. He cooked for Michael Dennis Brown. He cooked for Lee Young Lee. He cooked for Merwin. And the meal got a little bit long, and my friend Mark got nervous. Now, I knew there were 250 people through the trees here waiting for me to deliver Merwin for a 7 o'clock reading. And my friend Mark said, "You got to get going. Look what time it is." And I took the hat, and I took his hat and his binder and his coat, and I went to the end of the table, and I'm like, "William, we've got a poetry reading to get to." 80 years old. He held up your translator. He held up this lemon tart, and he said, "I know we've got a poetry reading to get to, Jeff, but I'm going to honor this." And he clicked his fork on the plate and kept eating at the exact same rate. We were 10 minutes late for the reading. Why wasn't he in a hurry? Because he knew he was going to put on the longest poetry reading I've been to in my life. 1:20. That's how long he read. This was old school. There's a rule. People got about a 45 minute attention span, and he just kept going. And I was so happy, and no one left because we were spellbound. He had us in the palm of his hand. I want to tell you, too, another thing about Merwin. One of the first questions I had to ask him when I got him in my old truck, which truck was that? I can't remember. I said, "William, I know you've told this story 1,000 times or more. I still need to hear it. Tell me about the time you went to visit Ezra Pound." Ezra Pound was a major poet who was not only a genius, but possibly crazy. He spent a percentage of his life in an insane asylum. And I've got to tell you something. In the middle of the 20th century, if you were early part of the 20th century, if you wanted to be a writer, you made a pilgrimage to see Pound, because Pound had this way of just looking at people and being able to tell them what they should do, what the path should be, what would the method be for them to be a great writer. I love that Merwin went to see him when he was 18 as a very old man. Similarly, I absolutely am just enchanted by the idea that an 18-year-old Ernest Hemingway, decades earlier, went to see a young Ezra Pound. Hemingway went to see Pound, and Pound took one look at him and said, "You look like the kind of guy who likes to be outside. Work with natural symbols. That's the way to become a storyteller for you." And when he took a look at Merwin, he said something very different. He said, "Learn other languages. Get your translating game on." He didn't say that, but learn how to translate. And in the learning how to translate, especially from older languages like Occitan, you'll learn about what you can do with your English. Because he visited Pound, we have Merwin's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, right? I think it's one way of thinking about it. And he told me that story happily and put his hand on my shoulder when I asked about it as we went down the road together. Me going down the road with the great American poets, but I want that to be the story, or part of the story of my life. I've mentioned troubadours once today, and I want to let you know too that William Merwin adored the idea of medieval troubadours, and I do too. Merwin, when he was young, bought a little French house that was just completely dilapidated, falling apart, and he bought it because it was right next to, in southern France, the ruins of the castle of the troubadour that Merwin considered to be the greatest. And that guy's name was Bernard de Ventadorn. And I'm looking up at a book now called The Maze of Ventadorn. Sorry, I'm burping. I ate a burrito. And the book is all about the buying of the French house, and it weaves in stories about Ventador. Merwin just thought he was the best. So I'll let you know what I'll kind of give you probably a shorter video next time on, and I'll give you a summary of what we talked about, what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I always try to tell you what people said, your colleagues, kind of, your fellow students of mine anyway. But to me, it's just one big class, one big happy class. Now, I've had a couple students up in Brainerd say, do I really have to do my project about heroes? And I'm like, yes, you have to write your project about heroes. There's a theme, there's a circle. Good news is, it's infinite. It's infinite, okay? I've got 2 more items, and this is one of them. Now, again, this is online. This is asynchronous, and I don't have all this figured out yet, because I don't. But somehow, I would like to imagine a way that we can also create what I'm creating in Brainerd, which at the end, in the last 2 weeks, maybe the last 2.5 weeks, I want to create a parlor. And I'm going to put before you one of my favorite metaphors of all. And because in the end, they're going to be presenting their papers. They've got to talk for at least 5 minutes. They've got to visually show us something too. How are we going to do that? Again, to be decided, TBD, as we put it. But there, and hopefully here, I imagine this happening. And it begins with the word imagine. Imagine that you enter a parlor. You come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you, and they are engaged in a heated discussion. A discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it is about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there, so that no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument. Then you put in your oar. Someone answers. You answer him. Another comes to your defense. Another aligns himself against you, to either the embarrassment or gratification of your opponent, depending upon the quality of your ally's assistance. However, the discussion is interminable. The hour grows late. You must depart. And you do depart, with the discussion still vigorously in progress. I think that accommodates a lot of situations in life, like when you go to a new workplace. Like when I arrived at Central Lakes College, I was entering into a parlor. There had been people that had preceded me, like the famous writer John Hassler, Joe Plutz, legendary teachers. And there'll come a day where I'll put the chalk down, or somebody will knock it out of my hands, and the college will continue on, kind of like a river. And I think that's really important, metaphor-wise. And will I get a parlor put together for Riverland? Let's see. Maybe we can shoot for a couple of live classes. This class isn't that big. Depends upon people's time, people's willingness. And I'm down to the last thing I want to say today. I got break coming up tomorrow, and it's in a week and a half, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm definitely not going to spring break. I'll never set foot in Florida again because of spring break. This will be a work and vacation for me. I'll be doing a couple of things. Schoolwork, 3 things. Poetry projects, soon, ones that are soon and distant for the fall, and grants, and I'm going to be cooking maple sap. It would be a great time right now to get my help on a topic. I had a woman yesterday, Anna Sesher, my 9 o'clock class. It was like 10 minutes before class began. She's like, Johnson, can I talk to you? I turned the music down. I said, yeah, heck yeah. Johnson, I want to do my project on Maria Goretti. She's a saint in our faith tradition. I said, you're good. Go. That was a 5-second conference. Maybe it'll take that long. Call me. Text me. Write me. Call me maybe. Let's take a Zoom meeting. Let me help you hammer together a topic. I couldn't be happier. I'm looking down here, and Heidi Pryor wrote me from this class at 1:30 today, and I wrote her back at 1:39, and I was sad that I didn't even get to her faster than that. and she was like, she was so kind and gracious at the end of the email. She says, you don't have to respond to this if you don't want to. Heidi, I'm gonna respond. You guys are just as important as any students I got anywhere ever, and I stand ready in the next week and a half to help. So if nothing could make me happier, especially while I'm staring fixedly at cooking sap. It's the greatest smell in the world. Putting my head in that steam, and I'll end by noting a miracle. It is a miracle that my maple sap season has arrived without a poet here. There always seems like there's a poet, and for once it's timed with my spring break. And by timed I mean it's the time of the year where suddenly it's freezing at night and thawing during the day, and that makes the sap go up and down the trees. I love you guys, and I hope you're staying safe and well down there. God bless you.